this is a little bit strange to do it this way. This is February 12th, and the lesson today is on communication. However, as on February 12th, I will be in Utah doing a women's conference, and so we're actually recording this a week early, but it will be posted February 12th. And in class the following week, we will revisit communication and talk about any questions you have. So if there's anything that comes up as you go through the lesson this week, be sure to write them down, and so that we can share those ideas and those notes the following week when we have our class. Following this class on communication, for the next 2 weeks in our class, we are going to be doing discipline. And it's a 2-week class. The first week, we will be talking about why children misbehave, what causes them to misbehave, what's going on in their little minds, the discouragement they're feeling that causes misbehavior. And then I'm going to leave you that week in a state of frustration because I won't give you any answers, but we'll create lots and lots of questions and problems. And then I want you to watch your children for a week and watch how you discipline them and watch what they do when they misbehave. And then as we come back the following week, we will talk about your observations that you have of your children and why they misbehave. And then we will also discuss, I think there's 13 different tools that you can use for discipline besides yelling and grounding. So it'll be a good 2 weeks that we will pick up after we do this communication. I'm going to do an introduction to this communication lesson, and then what I'm going to do is have Andrea attach the last class from last year on communication for you to watch the entire class, so that you will be able to get the full amount of information on communication. But that's why I say, if there's any questions that you have as you listen to it or as you watch it, just jot them down, and when we get back, before we start on our discipline, we will cover a recap of communication and its importance. Communication is so important to the well-being of the family, and how you teach, how you train, whether or not what you teach them actually gets inside them, that foundation is all on communication. And so often, the words we choose, the tones we choose, when we choose to say things, is all predicated on our point of view and what we want to get across. And that's not really communicating. We do a lot of talking with our children, with our spouses, but the conversation that goes on in talking isn't communication. Sometimes when you're talking to a spouse or with one of your children, and you can see that glazed over look, that deer in the headlight look, and you've finished talking and they haven't even been looking at you, and you finish your talk by saying, "You didn't even hear what I said." And they turn back to you and repeat verbatim every word you said. So you know they heard the verbiage, but they didn't get the feeling, the intent, the purpose with which you were talking. And until that happens, until heart understands heart and purpose understands purpose, communication really has not taken place. Let me share with you a story. This was given in a conference a while back in December of 2017. And the story is concerning an author named Douglas Adams. An English author, Douglas Adams, often recounted a story that happened to him in the 1970s. He arrived at the train station, this happened in England, so he arrived at the train station a half an hour earlier than necessary and decided to relax at a local cafe and pass some time while he waited for his train. He purchased a newspaper, something to drink, and a package of cookies. Then he found an empty seat across the table from an ordinary-looking fellow who was already deeply absorbed in a book. After placing his snacks on the table, he sat, he opened his newspaper, and he looked forward to doing the crossword puzzle. As Adam search through the newspaper, his attention was drawn to the man opposite him. He suddenly became aware that the man had just reached across the table and was opening the package of cookies that sat between them. Adam was stunned, as any man calmly would be, as the man extracted one cookie and ate it. This sort of thing the British are very bad with dealing with. There's nothing in our background or upbringing or education that teaches you how to deal with someone who in broad daylight just stole your cookies. Therefore, he did what most Englishmen would do in the situation, and he simply ignored it. He pretended to focus more intently on the crossword puzzle and nonchalantly grabbed a cookie for himself. He had hoped that his casual demeanor would put an end to the issue and allow the confused gentleman to realize his folly without making him a scene. Can you imagine his shock when not a moment later the man reached out, grabbed another cookie, and ate it? Adams decided he couldn't let this man eat all of his cookies, so he moved in and he took another one. It went back and forth like this for several minutes until the package was empty, and the other man stood up and gathered his things and walked away. Adams sighed a breath of relief that the ordeal was over, and he sat there dumbfounded by the thought that a seemingly respectable gentleman would knowingly take something that was not his. A few minutes later, as the train approached, Adams finished his drink, closed his newspaper, stood up to gather his things. It was then that he noticed at the edge of the table, underneath where his paper had been, was his package of cookies. He actually had been the thief and had been eating the other man's cookies. It's kind of funny because how his thought process and what he was thinking is totally wrapped around his perspective. When he thought the man was stealing his cookies, he was a little bit irate. But when he realized that indeed he was the one that was the thief, his opinion and his feelings changed. So the question is, as we go into our conversations and we talk with our children or our spouse, and our perspective is only focused on our view and our opinion and where we're coming from, then sometimes we are actually the thief. In a conference talk by Elder Zwick, he told about an experience that he had where he and his wife, he was driving a big rig 18-wheel semi-truck, and they were coming down the pass into California, and suddenly the cab of the truck filled with smoke. And he had his wife in the truck and their baby son. And as he tried to gear down and use the brakes, but gearing down mostly with those big rigs and pulling off to the side of the road so that he could stop safely, as this truck sort of came to the stop, not completely stopped, but was on the side of the road and was coming to the stop, his wife grabbed the baby and jumped out of the truck and rolled onto the gravel. And when he finally got the truck stopped, he jumped out and came over to her and looked at her and said, "What were you thinking?" Then she looked at him and she said, "I was just trying to save our son." And he said in that moment, he realized that the smoke in the truck, she thought the truck was going to catch fire, and that she was trying to save their baby, where he knew already that it was just an electrical failure in the truck, hazardous but not fatal. But she didn't know that, and he did. He said that situation, after they resolved it, was fine, but there again is him knowing one thing and assuming that she knew something else, and she didn't know information that he did. When we seek to discuss and communicate without listening, without finding out, without asking ourselves with real intent, what are you thinking? Help me to understand. When that becomes the goal, when that becomes the foundation of the communication we have, that's when real understanding can be transferred, and there can be a bridge built between hearts, and families can be bonded, and attachment can occur. And until attachment occurs, we don't get into the hearts of our children or our loved ones. The key to attachment is this good communication. So we're going to post the class now on communication and have you watch the whole thing and keep notes and see if there are some things that, if you have any questions, that we will deal with them when we come back the following week before we go into discipline. Hope that each one of you have a great week and practice the homework that will be listed at the end of the communication lesson.